Hey, this is Mike Lindsay from Vital MX, and we have an update on Chad Reed's situation, also what happened with his bike at the opening round of the World Supercross Championship. If you saw the heat races, you'll know that him and his MDK Motorsports teammate Josh Grant both had very similar looking crashes on the exact same jump in back-to-back heat races that put them both out of the entire night. Now, Josh Grant's was a little bit more immediately obvious because up-close photos and video showed that the bike had thrown a chain. And based on really close-up photos of that chain, it looks like the master link likely gave out. So it's a step on, onto the next table off. So pretty much endoed off the first table straight into the face of the second. One of the worst things you can probably do on a bike. One of the scariest things because you can just see you are going to face plant right into the next tabletop. Josh, we don't know quite the extent of his injuries. He seems to maybe be coming out of the better end of it than Chad. There hasn't been as much talk about him needing surgery or anything. I know he's going to get checked out further when he gets back to the U.S. Chad got checked out, and his injuries are a little bit more obvious, with a dislocated right shoulder, a broken left hand, and multiple broken ribs. He is actually currently flying to Australia, still banged up, battered, slinged up, looking at getting surgery once he gets there and figure out the rest of his situation. He has a couple weeks to the next round. Will he race? Well, I guess we'll get to that in a second. Now, let's talk about Chad's bike issue. At first, his just seemed more like, okay, the bike probably garbled, cut out something. We heard a few teams struggling with the fuel spec that's used at these World Supercross races as more similar to an FIM fuel than anything we use in AMA Supercross. So we heard a few guys complain about that. Some riders we've directly talked to have mentioned about their bikes garbling and cutting out over the weekend. So initially we thought that might have been Chad's issue. Well, close. Chad has posted that it was a full fuel pump failure, which that may sound odd to some people, but that is not terribly uncommon on EFI motorcycles. If you've had one, which we, of course, they've been around for over 10 years now for most of the 450s, you may have had a bike that's had a fuel pump failure at some point that either cuts out, gets weird with heat, and basically, quits feeding the bike fuel. At the factory level, between the fuels these guys run, the heat, a few other things, this is not an uncommon part to have go bad. However, teams usually change these pretty often. We know some factory level teams that literally only have a 10 to maybe 15 hour allowance for a fuel pump to be used before it basically gets chucked in the trash. That amongst the crazy intervals they have. Things like wiring harnesses that get changed out way more often than you think. Things because they're constantly taking the bikes apart. It's just not worth it to risk it for these guys. Chad is being pretty vocal on social media about this. Of course, he's put in a lot of work to come back for this series. Him coming back at 40 doing it, it's kind of a big deal, showing his kids he can do it, etc. So basically comments like, hey, this is something nobody should have to deal with. And he's right. It sucks. It happens. But that's also crap part with dirt bikes. Like anything can go anytime, even if the parts are well within their tolerance and time. It happens, man. It sucks. It's never a fun situation. The MDK Motorsports group has already reached out to a lot of us in media and wanted to remind us, hey, the 450s on our team, we have no involvement in. Basically, that KTM that Chad's riding is his bike. The Honda 450 that Josh Grant was on was his bike. They both had their private, those bikes privately prepped and brought them as a part of the MDK team. But the MDK team only really is taking responsibility for how the 250s are prepped, built, etc. So they sent us that little reminder. However, it is definitely odd that both their WSX guys had parts failures in the same night. Now, what gets interesting with Chad's situation is he has more recently started working closer with KTM. It's not I wouldn't call it a secret, but it's decently well known that his bike that came to World Supercross looks like it has a factory engine and probably factory electronics from KTM. He's done some testing for them as of recently here in California, working with the new bike. There's even been some back and forth on social media between him and current factory KTM riders about the condition of the bike. You may have saw that with him saying, hey, the bike goes to the whoops fine, and Plessinger and Marv fired back with, hey, hit real whoops. It's a whole thing. So to come out that vocally on social media, hey, the bike failed for this reason, when, again, KTM is supporting him more with the components, this gets into that interesting territory with how is everybody going to handle this and react down the road. Again, it's really easy to say, yeah, riders should be super vocal, but help, like everybody has a different feeling on how they should handle it. I don't think there's really a right or a wrong, but some people are going to feel differently about it based on their level of involvement. So we'll see if that ends up going anywhere. What does this mean for that bike and Chad and the whole situation going forward? Well, it's tough. These teams in World Supercross are required to provide riders at each race. The 10 teams have to show up with 2 WSX riders and 2 SX2 riders to every single race. The teams are being paid to be there. They're having all their equipment paid in haul. It's part of their kind of charter or franchise system. The series helps them, but in turn, they got to show up with talent. When we saw one of the initial contracts for the series, there was verbiage in there about you had to show up with a rider of equal value. That's tough. Maybe results-wise, but like Chad, star power, how do you do that? I don't know if there's really a way to enforce that. But the other thing they can enforce is the fine. If a team shows up without a rider, it is a big fine. A lot of teams told us it was $100K. We've had 1 or 2 teams also tell us it's $50K around that you show up without a guy. But either way, it's somewhere between those two numbers, and that's a lot of money. For their situation, is it worth it to even figure out how to get somebody else there and another bike? Because again, that bike is Chad's. It has factory KTM components, so it has a lot of components at Chad's. It's being shipped there. Can they really put anybody else on it? Or do they need to find a local Australian to race that can provide his own bike for the team? Do they somehow work it out and somebody is allowed to ride Chad's bike? Or does Chad pull one of his legendary gritty moments, get surgery next week, and somehow show up in 2 weeks to race? I guess we'll know more when we figure out what he has to have surgery on. Yes, he dislocated his shoulder. We'll see if there's anything torn in there. If it's just a minor AC separation or something, he might be fine there. I think it would depend more on what he's done to his hand. Maybe it's something that can simply be plated and he's going to go for it. Maybe it's a little bit more damage. I mean, personally, a lot of people here probably have done wrists or hands in some ways. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's not good. I've done one where I've been able to ride a couple weeks later, and I personally did one that was like 3 months and I couldn't make a fist for 2 years. So, yeah, it can go either way. It's nature of the sport, as they say. So really cool to see Chad, Ellie, everybody give updates on this. She's been really vocal about what's going on. You can check out their social media for all their stories and stuff they've been posting kind of through this whole process. I thought one of the really cool things was similar to the US, they had doctors on site. They had a good CT scan, X-ray set up there at the stadium. Chad and Josh both got checked out and then went back up the tunnel and watched all the main events before they went and got ambulances and went and got further checked out that night. So really gritty of those two dudes. Doesn't shock me. Personally, they both have rode through a ton of injuries. They're dirt bike guys. They wanted to see it go down. I think it shows how passionate all these guys really are about the sport. Like, hey, I got that banged up. Well, there's nothing I can do about it now. I might as well go back up in the stadium and watch the race. So again, that was pretty cool to see those guys, see them cheer on, watch their competitors, and enjoy it like the fans do, even when they probably were not feeling the best at the time. So again, it will be another interesting storyline coming in this round 2. There was so much chaos at round 1 with injuries. We have a couple others. It sounds like, again, Luke Klatt was another one that had a huge crash. He should be good for the next round. Dean Wilson posted he had an AC separation in his shoulder. Should be good to go for the next round. Justin Starling, possibly like a thumb or hand ligament of some sort. Not sure if he's in for the next round or if Brandon Hartranft will be back for HEP. We'll try to update an injury thing as we get another week or two down the road and get a little bit better confirmation on this, especially Chad's situation, as he seems to be a pretty big question mark. His injuries definitely sound the worst, but again, you never know with Chad Reed. So throw your thoughts in the comments section below. Like, thumbs up, subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. We'll keep trying to keep you up to date and bring you the news. So again, if you can, subscribe. It really help us out. Thanks for watching.